The morning sun of the Corvani homeworld was purple and soft. It painted the tall towers of the Imperial Palace in colors that Taiwan had never seen on Earth. He had been standing guard outside the Imperial nursery for 3 hours now. His legs were tired, but he did not move. That was his job. Stand still. Watch everything. Protect the most important room in the entire empire. Taiwan was one of 12 human guards who worked in the palace. The Corvani had hired them 2 years ago, after the Great Peace Treaty between Earth and the Corvani Empire. Humans were known for many things in the galaxy. They were strong fighters. They were clever builders. But most of all, they were loyal. Once a human gave their word, they kept it until death. The Corvani were tall creatures with scales that shined like jewels. They had 4 arms and eyes that glowed soft gold. Their emperor, Vorath, was the most powerful being in this part of the galaxy. He ruled over 200 planets and billions of subjects. But today, the thing he cared about most was sleeping in the room behind Taiwan, the emperor's only child, a tiny hatchling named Kira. Little Kira was born just 6 months ago. She was small enough to fit in a human's 2 hands. Her scales were pale blue, not yet colored like adult Corvani. Her eyes were too big for her face, and she made little chirping sounds when she was happy. The entire empire loved her. She was hope, she was the future, and she was also very, very good at escaping from her caretakers. Taiwan heard a small sound behind him. It was soft, like tiny feet on stone. He did not turn around. Guards were not supposed to move unless there was danger. But he listened carefully. The sound came closer. Then it stopped. Then he felt something touch his boot. He looked down very slowly. There, standing next to his foot, was little Kira. She was wrapped in a small blanket that was falling off her shoulders. Her big golden eyes looked up at him with pure curiosity. She chirped once. It sounded like a question. Taiwan's heart stopped for a moment. The emperor's child was outside the nursery. Alone. This was not good. This was very not good. He should call for help immediately. He should alert the other guards. He should do many things, but little Kira was already moving again. She had spotted something interesting. Taiwan's helmet was sitting on a small table near the wall. He had taken it off an hour ago, because the morning heat was making his head sweat. The helmet was round and black with a clear visor. It was standard issue for human guards. Nothing special about it. But to little Kira, it was the most amazing thing she had ever seen. She walked toward it with wobbly steps. Her tiny claws clicked on the stone floor. She reached the table and stretched up on her back legs. She was too small. She could not reach the helmet. She made a frustrated sound. Taiwan knew he should stop her. He should pick her up gently and carry her back to the nursery. He should find her caretakers and report this escape. But something made him wait. He wanted to see what she would do. Little Kira did not give up. She looked around and found a small cushion on the floor. She pushed it to the table with her nose. Then she climbed on top of it. Now she was tall enough. Her small arms reached out and grabbed the helmet. It was heavy for her, but she was determined. She pulled and pulled until it fell off the table. It landed on the floor with a loud clang. Little Kira fell backward with surprise. But she was not hurt. She rolled over and looked at the helmet lying next to her. Then she smiled. At least, Taiwan thought it was a smile. Her small mouth opened wide and showed tiny teeth. She crawled toward the helmet and looked inside it. To Taiwan, it was just a helmet. Dark inside, with padding for comfort. But to little Kira, it must have looked like a cave, a wonderful, mysterious cave that she could explore. She pushed her head inside first. Then her body followed. In seconds, she had disappeared completely into the helmet. Only her little tail stuck out from the opening. It wagged back and forth with happiness. Taiwan almost laughed. Almost. Guards were not supposed to laugh on duty. But this was the funniest thing he had seen in years. The heir to the Corvani Empire was now living inside his work helmet. He heard voices coming from the nursery. The caretakers had noticed that little Kira was missing. They were calling her name in worried voices. Soon, they would come outside and search for her. They would find her in the helmet. They would probably be angry at Taewon for letting this happen. But right now, in this moment, he did not care. Little Kira poked her head out from the helmet opening. She looked at Taewon with those huge golden eyes. Then she chirped at him. It was a happy sound. She had found her fortress, her castle, her new home, and she was not planning to leave anytime soon. Taewon finally moved. He walked over to the helmet slowly, making sure not to scare her. He got down on one knee so he was at her level. Little Kira watched him carefully. She was not afraid. She tilted her head to one side like she was studying him. "Hello, little one," Taewon said softly. "That is a very nice fort you have there." Little Kira chirped again. She ducked back inside the helmet and then poked her head out from a different angle. She was playing. She wanted him to play with her. The voices from the nursery were getting louder. The caretakers were coming. Taewon had maybe 1 minute before they arrived. He should stand up and return to his post. He should pretend this never happened. Instead, he stayed on his knee and smiled at the little hatchling. "All right," he whispered. "I will guard your fort. But this will be our secret. Okay?" Little Kira did not understand his words, but she understood his tone. She understood his smile. She made a happy chirping sound and disappeared back into the helmet. And that was how Taewon, a simple human guard from Earth, became the official protector of the Emperor's hatchling and her new helmet fortress. The caretakers found them like that. The human guard kneeling beside a helmet on the floor, watching over the most precious creature in the Empire as she played inside her new favorite toy. They did not know whether to be angry or relieved, but deep down, they were impressed. Because most guards would have taken the child back immediately. Most guards would have followed the rules without thinking. But this human had done something different. He had let a child be a child. And in the Corvani Empire, that was a rare and precious gift. The caretakers stood frozen in place. Their names were Vela and Soren. And they had been caring for royal hatchlings for over 30 years. They had seen many things in that time. They had seen young princes throw tantrums that shook the walls. They had seen princesses refuse to eat for days. But they had never seen anything like this. The Emperor's only child was inside a human's helmet. And she looked happier than she had been in weeks. Vela was the first to speak. Her voice was sharp with worry. "Guard, what is the meaning of this? Why did you not bring her back immediately?" Taewon stood up slowly. He kept his eyes down as a sign of respect. "I apologize, caretaker Vela. The little one found my helmet and claimed it before I could react. I did not want to scare her by taking it away." Soren stepped closer and looked at the helmet. Little Kira's tail was still sticking out, wagging with joy. Small chirping sounds came from inside. The hatchling was clearly having the time of her life. "She has never shown interest in objects before," Soren said quietly. "She usually just sleeps and eats. This is the first time she has played." Vela's expression softened a little. She had been worried, but now she was curious. The healers said she was developing slowly. They said she might not be as active as other hatchlings. But look at her now. All three of them watched the helmet. Little Kira poked her head out and saw them staring. She chirped loudly and ducked back inside. Then she poked her head out from another angle. She was playing hide-and-seek with them. Taewon could not help but smile. She is smart. She already knows how to surprise people. Vela looked at the human guard for a long moment. Humans were strange creatures to her. They were soft, with no scales. They had only 2 arms, and their eyes did not glow. But there was something gentle about this one. Something patient. "Very well," Vela said finally. "She seems calm with you nearby. We will let her play for a little while. But someone must inform the Emperor that his child has left the nursery." Soren's face went pale. "Must we tell him?" "He will be very upset. He will be more upset if he finds out later," Vela replied. "I will go speak with him. Soren, you stay here with the guard. Make sure little Kira does not wander further." Vela walked away quickly. Her forearms moved nervously at her sides. Telling the Emperor that his precious hatchling had escaped was not something anyone wanted to do. Soren sat down on the floor near the helmet. She was old for a Corvani, with scales that had faded to a soft silver color. She watched little Kira play and shook her head slowly. "In all my years, I have never seen a hatchling so interested in something," she said. "What is special about your helmet, human?" Taewon looked at the helmet. It was dirty from years of use. There were scratches on the surface, and the visor had a small crack. It was nothing special at all. "I do not know," he admitted. "Maybe she likes the shape. Or maybe she likes that it is dark inside, like a small cave." "Our hatchlings do like small spaces," Soren agreed. "In the old days, before we built cities, our people raised their young in caves. It is in our blood to feel safe in tight places." Little Kira came out of the helmet completely. She was dragging something behind her. It was a small piece of cloth that Taewon kept inside the helmet to clean his visor. She pulled it into the middle of the floor and sat on it proudly. "She is decorating," Soren laughed. "She is making her fort more comfortable." The hatchling looked around for more things to add. Her golden eyes landed on a small ribbon that had fallen from Soren's clothing. She walked over and grabbed it in her tiny claws. Then she carried it back to the helmet and pushed it inside. "That was my favorite ribbon," Soren said. But she did not sound angry. She sounded amazed. Taewon watched the little one work. She was so focused on her task, so determined to make her fort perfect. He had seen human children do the same thing, building blanket castles in their bedrooms, claiming cardboard boxes as their kingdoms. Children were the same everywhere in the galaxy, it seemed. "Human," Soren said after a while. "May I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you not take her back to the nursery right away? You could have been punished for letting her stay out here." Taewon thought about the question carefully. He was a soldier. He was trained to follow orders and never break rules. But when he had seen that tiny creature playing so happily, something in him had changed. "On Earth, we have a saying," he said slowly. "Let children be children." It means that we should not always control every moment of their lives. Sometimes, we must let them explore and discover things on their own. Soren nodded slowly. "We do not have such a saying in our culture. Our hatchlings are protected every second of every day. They are never allowed to take risks or make mistakes. Maybe that is why she escaped." Taewon suggested gently. "Maybe she wanted to find something on her own." Taewon. 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 Before Soren could reply, they heard heavy footsteps coming from the palace. Many footsteps, and the sound of weapons being drawn. The Emperor was coming, and he was bringing his guards. Taewon stood up straight and placed his hands behind his back. This was the moment he had been dreading. Emperor Vorath was known for his temper. If he believed that Taewon had endangered his child, the punishment would be severe. The door at the end of the hallway burst open. Emperor Vorath entered first. He was massive, even for a Corvani. His scales were deep red, the color of royalty. His forearms were thick with muscle, and his golden eyes burned with worry. Behind him came 12 Imperial guards. Their weapons were drawn and glowing with energy. They looked ready to kill anyone who had harmed the hatchling. Vorath's eyes scanned the area quickly. He saw Soren sitting on the floor. He saw the human guard standing at attention. And then he saw the helmet. Little Kira chose that exact moment to poke her head out. She saw her father and made the loudest, happiest chirping sound Taewon had ever heard. She climbed out of the helmet and ran toward the Emperor, with her little legs moving as fast as they could. Vorath dropped to his knees and caught her in his lower arms. He held her close to his chest and closed his eyes. For a moment, the most powerful being in the galaxy looked like any other worried parent who had just found their lost child. "My little one," he whispered. "You scared me so badly." Little Kira chirped and patted his face with her tiny claws. She was not scared at all. She was excited. She wanted to show him something. She squirmed out of his arms and ran back to the helmet. She grabbed it with both hands and tried to drag it toward her father. It was too heavy for her. But she did not give up. She pulled and pulled, making small grunting sounds. "She wants to show you her fort," Taewon said quietly. The Emperor looked at the human guard. His eyes were still full of worry. But there was something else there too. Curiosity. "Her fort?" he repeated. "Yes, Your Majesty. She found my helmet and claimed it as her fortress. She has been playing inside it for the past hour." Vorath looked at his daughter. She was still pulling the helmet, trying so hard to bring it to him. He had never seen her work so hard for anything. He had never seen her show so much energy. "She is happy," he said softly. "She is actually happy." And in that moment, everything changed. Emperor Vorath stayed on his knees. He watched his daughter struggle with the helmet, pulling it with all her tiny strength. The Imperial guards behind him shifted nervously. They had never seen their emperor in such a position. He was always standing tall, always commanding, always in control. But now, he looked like a simple father, watching his child play. "Your Majesty," the captain of the Imperial Guards spoke carefully. "Should we take the hatchling back to the nursery? She should not be out here in the open." Vorath raised one of his 4 hands to silence the captain. His eyes never left little Kira. "No. Let her be. I want to see what she does." The guards exchanged confused looks. This was not normal behavior for the Emperor. But they knew better than to argue. Little Kira finally gave up trying to move the helmet. It was simply too heavy for her. She sat down next to it and made a sad chirping sound. Then she looked at Taewon with pleading eyes. Taewon understood immediately. He looked at the Emperor for permission. Vorath gave him a small nod. The human guard walked over and knelt beside the hatchling. "Do you want help, little one?" he asked softly. Kira chirped and pointed at the helmet, then at her father. She wanted to show him her fortress. She wanted him to see how wonderful it was. Taewon picked up the helmet and carried it toward the Emperor. Little Kira followed close behind him, her tiny legs moving quickly to keep up. When they reached Vorath, Taewon placed the helmet on the ground in front of him. "This is her fort, Your Majesty," Taewon explained. "She has spent the morning making it her own." Vorath leaned forward and looked inside the helmet. He saw the small cloth that Kira had arranged like a bed. He saw the ribbon she had stolen from Soren, now wrapped around the padding like decoration. He saw small scratches on the inside surface where her tiny claws had marked her territory. His chest tightened with emotion. His daughter had created something. She had built her own small world inside this simple object. "She has never done anything like this before," Vorath said quietly. "The healers said she was slow to develop. They said she might never be as active as other hatchlings. But look at her now." Kira climbed back into the helmet to demonstrate. She disappeared inside and then poked her head out, looking at her father with bright golden eyes. She chirped proudly as if saying, "See, this is mine. I made this." Vorath laughed. It was a deep, warm sound that echoed through the hallway. The guards had never heard their emperor laugh like that. It made them uncomfortable. They did not know how to react. "My little warrior," Vorath said fondly. "You have conquered your first fortress." 2. Kira chirped happily and disappeared back inside. The Emperor stood up slowly. He was much taller than Taewon, towering over the human by more than a full head. His red scales caught the purple sunlight and glowed like fire. He looked down at the human guard with an expression that was hard to read. "What is your name, human?" Taewon stood at attention. "Taewon, Your Majesty. I serve in the 3rd Division of the Palace Guard." "Taewon." The Emperor repeated the name carefully. "You let my daughter play when you should have returned her to the nursery. You broke protocol. You ignored your duties." Taewon swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Majesty. I accept full responsibility for my actions." The guards behind Vorath gripped their weapons tighter. They expected the Emperor to order punishment. Maybe prison. Maybe worse. Humans were useful. But they were not citizens of the Empire. They had no protections under Corvani law. But Vorath did something unexpected. He smiled. "You did exactly what I wished my own people would do," he said. "You treated my daughter like a child. not like an object to be protected. You let her explore. You let her play. You let her be alive. Tae-won was confused. Your Majesty, do you know what it is like to be born into royalty, Tae-won? Every moment of your life is planned. Every action is watched. Every word is recorded. My daughter is only 6 months old, and already she has never known freedom. She has never been allowed to simply exist. The Emperor looked at the helmet where his daughter was still playing. His expression softened with sadness. I was raised the same way. I was never allowed to be a child. I was trained from birth to be an emperor, and I always promised myself that my children would have a different life. But when Kira was born, I forgot that promise. I was so worried about protecting her that I forgot to let her live. Soren, the old caretaker, stepped forward carefully. Your Majesty, we were only following your orders. You told us to keep her safe at all times. I know, Vorath admitted. And you did your duty well. But perhaps I gave the wrong orders. He knelt down again and tapped gently on the helmet. Little Kira poked her head out and chirped at him. Hello, my little one, the Emperor said softly. Do you like your fort? Kira chirped loudly and ducked back inside. She does not want to leave, Tae-won observed. She feels safe in there. Vorath nodded. Then she will not leave. Not until she is ready. The captain of the guard stepped forward with concern on his face. Your Majesty, the council meeting starts in 1 hour. You are expected to attend. Cancel it. The captain's jaw dropped. Your Majesty, you cannot cancel the council meeting. The representatives from the outer colonies have traveled for weeks to be here. Vorath looked at his captain with eyes that glowed like molten gold. I am the Emperor of 200 worlds. I can cancel any meeting I choose. Today, I am spending time with my daughter. The captain wanted to argue, but he knew it was pointless. He bowed low and signaled for the other guards to leave. They marched away quickly, leaving only Vorath, Tae-won, Soren, and little Kira in the hallway. You may stay, human, Vorath said to Tae-won. My daughter seems to like you. Tae-won bowed respectfully. Thank you, Your Majesty. Vorath sat down on the floor, which was something emperors simply did not do. His expensive robe spread around him, getting dirty on the stone. He did not care. He wanted to be at his daughter's level. When I was young, there was an old servant in the palace who used to tell me stories, Vorath said. She was from a small village in the mountains, and she knew tales that were older than the empire itself. One story she told me was about a mighty king who conquered every land in the world. But when he came home, his young son did not care about his victories. The son only wanted his father to sit with him and play. Kira came out of the helmet and crawled into her father's lap. She curled up against his chest, still holding the ribbon she had taken from Soren. Her eyes were getting heavy. All the excitement was making her tired. I finally understand that story, Vorath continued. All my power, all my wealth, all my armies, none of it matters to her. She just wants me to be here. She just wants to play. Tae-won watched the powerful emperor hold his tiny daughter. In this moment, Vorath was not a ruler. He was not a warrior. He was not a legend. He was just a father. And that was the most important thing he had ever been. Thank you, Tae-won, Vorath said quietly. You taught me something today that none of my advisors could ever teach. Sometimes the best thing we can do for the ones we love is simply let them be free. Tae-won bowed his head. I only did what felt right, Your Majesty. And that, Vorath smiled, is exactly why humans are so valuable. You follow your hearts, not your rules. Little Kira was almost asleep now. Her breathing was slow and peaceful. She was still holding the ribbon in her tiny claws, dreaming of her helmet fortress. And outside the palace, the purple sun began to set on a day that would change everything. News traveled fast in the imperial palace. By the time the second sun set, everyone knew what had happened. The emperor had canceled a council meeting. He had sat on the dirty floor like a common worker. He had spent hours watching his daughter play inside a human's helmet. The noble families were shocked. The advisors were confused. The servants whispered to each other in dark corners. This was not how emperors behaved. This was not proper. This was not right. But something else was spreading through the palace too. Something unexpected. Hope. The servants who had seen the emperor playing with his daughter told others about it. They described how he had laughed, how he had smiled, how he had looked happier than they had ever seen him. These stories spread from person to person, from wing to wing, until the entire palace was buzzing with them. By the next morning, everything was different. Taewon arrived at his post outside the nursery at dawn. He expected the day to be normal. He expected to stand guard for hours without anything interesting happening. But when he reached the hallway, he found a surprise waiting for him. Little Kira was already there. She was sitting next to his helmet, which someone had cleaned and polished overnight. The ribbon was still inside, along with several new items. Colorful stones, soft feathers, a tiny blanket made of expensive silk, and standing next to the hatchling was Emperor Vorath himself. "Good morning, Taewon," the emperor said calmly. "I hope you do not mind that my daughter borrowed your helmet again." Taewon bowed quickly. "Of course not, Your Majesty. The helmet is honored to serve." Kira chirped happily when she saw Taewon. She grabbed one of the colorful stones and held it up for him to see. She wanted to show him the new decorations in her fort. "She has been collecting things all morning," Vorath explained. "She took stones from the garden, feathers from the kitchen birds, a blanket from my own chambers. Her caretakers tried to stop her, but I told them to let her continue." Taewon looked at the helmet. It had transformed overnight from a simple piece of equipment into a small treasure chest. Every item inside had been placed carefully by tiny claws. "She is an artist," Taewon said with a smile. "She is a builder," Vorath corrected. "Like her mother was." There was sadness in the emperor's voice. Taewon had heard stories about the empress. She had died giving birth to Kira. It was a tragedy that still haunted the palace. The empress would have loved this. Vorath continued quietly. "She always said that children needed room to grow. She fought with the advisors about it constantly. She wanted Kira to have freedom, to have adventures, to have a childhood." Kira crawled into the helmet and disappeared. A moment later, her little face appeared at the opening. She made a sound that was almost like a laugh. "I think she is getting what her mother wanted," Taewon said gently. Vorath nodded. "Because of you, human. Because you did not follow the rules." Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. A group of Corvani nobles appeared, led by a tall female with silver scales. She wore expensive jewelry and walked with the confidence of someone who believed they were very important. "Your Majesty," she said with a bow that was not quite low enough. "The council demands to know why yesterday's meeting was cancelled. The representatives from the outer colonies are furious." "Let them be furious," Vorath replied calmly. "I had more important matters to attend to." The noblewoman looked at the helmet on the floor. She saw little Kira playing inside it. Her expression turned to disgust. "More important than the future of the empire? Your Majesty, this is a child's toy. It is beneath your attention." Taewon felt anger rise in his chest, but he stayed silent. It was not his place to speak. Vorath, however, was not silent. "Lady Rova," he said in a voice like ice. "That child is the future of the empire. She is more important than any trade agreement or political alliance. And if you cannot understand that, perhaps you should not be advising me." Lady Rova's silver scales turned pale. She had not expected the emperor to speak to her this way. She was one of the most powerful nobles in the court. No one spoke to her like that. "Your Majesty, I meant no disrespect. I only worry that your attention is being diverted by distractions." She glanced at Taewon with clear hatred in her eyes. "Perhaps the human guards are a bad influence." "The human guards are the best decision I ever made," Vorath replied firmly. "This human showed more wisdom yesterday than my entire council has shown in years. He understood something that all of you have forgotten." "And what is that, Your Majesty?" "That children are not objects to be managed. They are people to be loved." Lady Rova opened her mouth to argue, but Vorath raised his hand. "This discussion is over. Tell the council that meetings will resume tomorrow." Today, I am spending time with my daughter. If anyone has a problem with that, they can find a new emperor." The noble woman bowed stiffly and walked away. The other nobles followed her, whispering angrily among themselves. They did not understand what was happening. The emperor they knew was strict and focused. This new emperor, the one who played with his child and sat on floors, was strange to them. But Tae-won understood. He had seen the same thing happen on Earth many times. Parents who worked too hard, suddenly realizing that they were missing their children's lives. Powerful people learning that power meant nothing without love. "You have made enemies today, Your Majesty," Tae-won said carefully. Vorath smiled. "I have had enemies my entire life. A few more will not matter." He sat down on the floor again, not caring about his expensive robes. Little Kira crawled out of the helmet and onto his lap. She held up a blue feather for him to see. "Beautiful," Vorath told her. "You have excellent taste." Kira chirped proudly and added the feather to her collection inside the helmet. Tae-won watched them together. The most powerful being in this part of the galaxy, sitting on a dirty floor, playing with a child and a helmet. It was strange. It was wonderful. It was exactly what the universe needed. "Tae-won," the Emperor said without looking up. "Yes, Your Majesty? I am assigning you as Kira's personal guard. From now on, wherever she goes, you go. Whatever she needs, you provide. Your only duty is to protect her and let her be a child." Tae-won felt his heart swell. "It would be my honor, Your Majesty. And one more thing." "Yes?" Vorath finally looked up. His golden eyes were warm with gratitude. "Thank you for your helmet." Tae-won laughed. For the first time since he arrived on this alien world, he truly laughed. "The helmet is happy to serve, Your Majesty." Little Kira poked her head out of her fortress and chirped at both of them. She did not understand their words, but she understood their feelings. She knew she was safe. She knew she was loved. And that was all that mattered. The day passed slowly, filled with small adventures and simple joys. Little Kira explored every corner of the hallway. She collected more treasures for her helmet fortress. She climbed on Tae-won's boots and played with the laces. She fell asleep in her father's arms twice and woke up ready for more adventure each time. By evening, the purple sun was painting the sky in shades of gold and red. The palace grew quiet as servants prepared for the night. Lamps were lit in every window, casting warm shadows through the ancient halls. Tae-won stood guard near the nursery door, while Vorath sat with Kira on a soft cushion. The hatchling was tired now. Her movements were slow, and her chirps were quieter than before. She had spent all her energy on the biggest day of her young life. "She needs to sleep," Vorath said softly. "But I do not want this day to end." Tae-won understood that feeling well. On Earth, parents said the same thing when watching their children grow. They wanted to freeze time. They wanted to keep those perfect moments forever. "There will be more days like this, Your Majesty," Tae-won said. "Many more." Vorath looked at the human with something like surprise. "You truly believe that?" "I know it. Today was not an accident. It was a beginning." The Emperor considered those words carefully. Then he smiled and looked down at his daughter. She was holding the helmet strap in her tiny claws, refusing to let go even as sleep pulled at her eyes. "She loves that helmet more than any toy we ever gave her," Vorath said. "We bought her the finest things in the Empire. Crystal rattles from the ocean moons, singing flowers from the eastern gardens, stuffed creatures made by the greatest artists." She ignored them all. "Children are like that," Tae-won replied. "On Earth, we have a saying. Give a child an expensive toy, and they will play with the box it came in." Vorath laughed quietly, trying not to wake Kira. "That is exactly what happened. We gave her the Empire, and she chose a helmet." The nursery door opened slowly. Old Soren stepped out, her silver scales catching the lamplight. She moved carefully, not wanting to disturb the peace of the moment. "Your Majesty," she said in a gentle voice, "it is time for the little one to rest properly." May I take her to her bed? Vorath hesitated. He looked at his daughter's peaceful face and did not want to let her go. But he knew she needed proper sleep. He nodded slowly and placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. Good night, my little warrior, he whispered. Dream of your fortress. Kira made a soft sound but did not wake. Soren carefully lifted her from the Emperor's arms and carried her toward the nursery. But Kira still held the helmet strap. The helmet dragged on the floor behind them. Soren tried to remove it from her grip, but Kira's claws tightened. Even in sleep, she would not let go of her treasure. Leave it, Vorath said. Let her keep it tonight. Soren bowed and carried both the hatchling and the helmet into the nursery. The door closed softly behind them. Vorath stood up slowly. His joints ached from sitting on the floor all day. His robes were wrinkled and dirty. He looked nothing like an emperor. But his eyes were bright with something that had been missing for a long time. Peace. Walk with me, Taewon, he said. They walked together through the quiet halls of the palace. Guards bowed as they passed. Servants pressed themselves against the walls to make room. Everyone watched the strange sight of their emperor walking side by side with a human as if they were old friends. Do you know why we hired humans to guard the palace? Vorath asked as they walked. I was told it was because of the peace treaty, Taewon answered. A sign of trust between our peoples. That is the official reason, but there is another reason, one that I never told anyone. They reached a tall window that looked out over the city below. Millions of lights sparkled in the darkness. Ships flew between towers carrying goods and passengers. It was a kingdom of wonder and power. When I first met humans, I was young and foolish. Vorath continued. I thought your species was weak. You had no scales for protection. No claws for fighting. Your technology was simple compared to ours. I could not understand how you had survived in such a dangerous galaxy. Taewon listened without speaking. But then I saw something that changed my mind forever. I was visiting your planet for diplomatic talks. Our ship landed near a small village. There was a fire in one of the buildings, a terrible fire that was spreading fast. Vorath's voice grew heavy with memory. Your people ran toward the fire, not away from it. Toward it. They did not have special equipment. They did not have protection. But they ran into the flames to save others. I watched a human woman carry 3 children out of that building. Her skin was burned. Her clothes were on fire. But she did not stop until every child was safe. He turned to look at Taewon directly. That is when I understood what makes humans special. It is not your strength or your technology. It is your hearts. You care about others more than you care about yourselves. You protect the weak even when it costs you everything. Taewon felt pride swell in his chest. Not pride for himself, but for his entire species. That is why I hired human guards, Vorath finished. Because I wanted my daughter to be protected by people who would love her, not just serve her. I wanted her to be surrounded by hearts, not just weapons. The Emperor placed one of his 4 hands on Taewon's shoulder. And today, you proved that I made the right choice. You loved my daughter from the moment you saw her. You let her play. You let her grow. You treated her like a person, not like a prize. She is easy to love, Your Majesty, Taewon said simply. Yes, she is. But not everyone sees that. Most people see her as the heir to the empire. They see her as power and wealth and politics. Only you saw her as a child who wanted to play in a helmet. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the lights of the city twinkle below. The galaxy is changing, Taewon, Vorath said finally. Old empires are falling. New powers are rising. Wars are coming that will reshape everything we know. But in all that chaos, one thing remains constant. What is that, Your Majesty? The love between parent and child. The joy of watching the young ones grow. The simple happiness of a hatchling playing in a helmet. Vorath smiled warmly. Those things are eternal. Those things matter more than any empire. He straightened his robes and lifted his chin with renewed dignity. Tomorrow, I will return to my duties. I will sit in council meetings and make difficult decisions. I will be the emperor that my people need. But every evening, I will sit on the floor with my daughter and play with her helmet fortress. She will love that, Your Majesty. I know, and I will love it too. Vorath turned and began walking back toward his chambers. But he stopped after a few steps and looked back at Taewon. Thank you, human, for your helmet, for your patience, for your heart. You have given me something that all my wealth could never buy. What is that, Your Majesty? The Emperor smiled, and for a moment he looked like the young father he truly was, not the mighty ruler he had to be. A reason to come home. He walked away into the shadows of the palace, leaving Taewon alone by the window. The human guard looked out at the alien city spread below him. He was far from Earth, far from everything he knew. But tonight, he felt closer to home than ever before, because home was not a place. Home was a feeling, and he had found that feeling in the most unexpected place, inside a helmet, with a tiny hatchling who had claimed it as her fortress. And that was the most human thing in the entire galaxy.